The Grand Assembly Hall had never been so quiet. 400 species sat in their designated seats, their translators humming softly as speaker delivered the news they had all feared. The Void Harvesters had returned. Was old, even by standards. His pale blue skin had faded to almost white over his 3 centuries of service. He had seen wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires, but nothing in his long life had prepared him for this moment. "The outer colonies of the sector have gone silent," he announced. His voice carried across the massive chamber without any need for amplification. "Scout ships sent to investigate have not returned. The pattern matches historical records from the last harvester cycle, 12,000 years ago." Panic rippled through the assembly. Some species began arguing immediately. Others sat in stunned silence. The Void Harvesters were not just an enemy. They were a force of nature, an extinction event that visited the galaxy every few to feed on civilization itself. "We must evacuate the core worlds," shouted Ambassador Kell of the. Her silver scales caught the light as she stood. "There is no fighting the Harvesters. Our ancestors tried. They failed." "And go where?" demanded War Leader, his massive frame rising from his seat. "The Harvesters do not stop. They do not tire. They consume everything." The argument might have continued for hours. It might have continued for days. But at that moment, every alarm in the station began to scream. "Unidentified vessel approaching," announced the station's security system. "Speed exceeds known parameters. Collision course detected." On the main display screen, a small ship appeared. It was battered and burned, trailing smoke and debris. It moved in ways that should have been impossible, spinning and diving through the station's defense grid like it was dancing with death itself. "Fire on that vessel," commanded N, the security chief. His warriors obeyed instantly. Energy beams lanced out toward the intruder. The ship dodged them all. It rolled and twisted, absorbing hits that should have destroyed it 3 times over. Then, with a final desperate burst of speed, it crashed through the docking bay doors and skidded across the landing platform in a shower of sparks and flame. Security forces surrounded the wreckage within seconds. Weapons were raised. Translators were activated. Every eye in the Grand Assembly watched through the security feeds as the ship's damaged door slowly opened. A figure stepped out into the smoke. It walked on 2 legs, had 2 arms, and stood about average height for a bipedal species. Its skin was a soft brown color, and it had dark hair on top of its head. It wore a torn uniform covered in blood and burns. Behind it came more figures. 37 in total, some carrying others who were too injured to walk. They were clearly exhausted. They were clearly terrified, but they stood together, forming a protective circle around their wounded. The first figure raised its hands to show it carried no weapons. Then it spoke. "Please," it said. The translator struggled with the strange language for a moment before catching up. "We need help. We are requesting asylum." N stepped forward, his weapon aimed directly at the creature's chest. "You have invaded Sovereign Council space. You have damaged Council property. Identify yourself and your species immediately." The creature did not flinch. It met N's eyes without looking away. "My name is Sam Harper. I am the captain of the human vessel Horizon. We come from a planet called Earth, in a system you have not yet discovered." Humans? The word meant nothing to anyone in the assembly. High Scholar, keeper of the Galactic Archives, quickly searched his databases. Nothing. No record of this species existed anywhere in known history. "You are unknown to us," said, his image appearing on a screen near the docking bay. "How is this possible? We have mapped every corner of this galaxy." Sam Harper smiled, though there was no joy in it. "Apparently not every corner. We have been out there, alone, for a very long time. We did not know anyone else existed until 6 months ago." "And what happened 6 months ago?" asked. Sam's smile faded. "Something found us, something that came from the dark spaces between stars. It destroyed our colony then it destroyed New Eden, then Station. We have been running ever since, trying to find anyone who could tell us what we were facing." The assembly chamber went completely silent. Every representative understood what Sam was describing. Every species knew that horror. "You have encountered the Void Harvesters," said softly. "Is that what they are called?" Sam asked. "We just called them the enemy. We did not have time for fancy names. We were too busy dying." Lieutenant Kate Monroe stepped up beside her captain. She was shorter than him, with lighter skin and hair the color of copper. Her uniform was in better condition, but her eyes carried the same exhausted determination. "We are not asking for much," she said. "Just information. Tell us what we are fighting. Tell us if there is any way to stop them. Then we will leave and fight our own battle." Kel watched these humans with growing fascination. They had just survived an encounter with the most terrifying force in galactic history. They had lost colonies, lost friends, lost everything. And yet here they stood, not begging for protection, but asking for knowledge so they could go back and fight. "The Council must deliberate," announced. "You will be held in secure quarters until we decide your fate. Do not resist." Sam Harper nodded slowly. "We will cooperate, but please do not take too long. Every hour you debate, more of our people die." As security forces led the humans away, En approached the wreckage of their ship. He had seen countless vessels in his career. He had never seen anything like this. The damage should have killed everyone on board 10 times over. The hull was more whole than metal. The engine had literally melted. "How did they survive?" he muttered to himself. One of the humans, a young male being carried on a stretcher, heard the question. He laughed weakly and said something his translator converted a moment later. "We are humans," the young man said. "Surviving is what we do." En watched them go, an unfamiliar feeling settling in his chest. He had faced enemies that made entire fleets tremble. He had fought in wars that lasted centuries, but something about these small, fragile-looking creatures made him uneasy. It was not fear, exactly. It was something closer to recognition, like looking into a mirror and seeing something he had forgotten existed. Hope, the detention quarters were comfortable enough. The humans had beds, food, and medical supplies for their wounded. Guards stood outside every door, but they did not enter unless invited. It was prison dressed up as hospitality. Sam Harper sat beside one of the injured crew members, holding his hand, while Dr. Ben Sawyer worked on his wounds. The young man's name was Danny, barely 22 years old. He had been an engineer on the horizon before a harvester beam tore through the engine room. "Will he make it?" Sam asked quietly. Ben wiped sweat from his forehead and nodded. "He is tough. They all are. I have never seen people survive what this crew has survived." Outside, Ambassador Kell watched through a small window. She had told herself she was simply observing potential threats to Council security. That was the official reason for her visit. But the truth was far simpler. She was curious. The humans fascinated her. They moved differently from other species, with a kind of restless energy that never seemed to fade. Even their wounded kept trying to help, kept insisting they were fine, kept asking what they could do to be useful. She watched as Captain Harper shared his food ration with a crew member who had already eaten hers. She watched as Kate Monroe told jokes that made the exhausted humans laugh despite everything. She watched as they cared for each other with a tenderness that seemed completely at odds with their violent arrival. "What are you?" whispered to herself. High Scholar found her there an hour later. The ancient keeper of archives was trembling, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly in a way that meant extreme distress. "Ambassador," he said, "you need to see this. The Council needs to see this." Followed him to the medical analysis wing, where had been scanning the human survivors. The data on his screens made no sense to her at first glance. "I do not understand," she admitted. "What am I looking at?" His voice shook as he explained. There, Earth. It has a gravity rating of 1.0 on the standard scale. That is nearly 3 times the galactic average. Their atmosphere is 21% oxygen, a gas that is actively toxic to most species at that concentration. Their sun bombards them with constant radiation that would kill in hours. Felt her scales go cold. That is impossible. Nothing could evolve in such conditions. And yet they did. Pulled up more data. Look at their cellular structure. They have built-in repair mechanisms that activate when damaged. Their bodies literally fight death at the molecular level. Their bones are dense enough to be used as construction material. Their muscles contain a chemical called adrenaline that temporarily increases their strength and speed when they are threatened. He turned to face her directly. Ambassador, these creatures are from a death world. By every measure we have, they should not exist. I ran their biological data through our classification system 5 times. Each time, it returned the same result. What result? Swallowed hard. Class 12 persistent. The category is theoretical. It was created as a thought experiment to describe a species that simply refuses to die no matter what the universe throws at it. We never believed such a thing could actually exist. The emergency council session that followed was the most chaotic in living memory. Representatives shouted over each other as presented his findings. Some called the data false. Others demanded the humans be executed immediately as too dangerous to exist. A few sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they were hearing. "You are telling us," war leader said slowly, "that these soft, squishy little creatures are among the most dangerous beings in the galaxy." "I am telling you," replied, "that their entire existence is a defiance of natural law. They evolved on a world that actively tried to kill them every single day. And they won." While the council argued, Kate Monroe was doing what she did best. She had found a way to tap into the station's communication network from her quarters. It was not a sophisticated hack. Human technology was so different from galactic standard that their basic systems were invisible to alien security. She listened to council debates. She read historical records, and slowly the truth about the Void Harvesters became clear. They were old, older than the current council, older than the species that had formed it. They had been the first intelligent life in the galaxy billions of years ago, but something had happened to them. Something had broken them. Now they roamed the void between galaxies, returning every few thousand years to consume the civilizations that had grown in their absence. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what drove them. Kate found a single reference in the oldest archives, a warning written by a species that had died 12,000 years ago. The harvesters fed on intelligent life because something else required it. Something that lived in the true darkness, far beyond the edge of the galaxy. Something that had driven the harvesters mad with a single glimpse. The harvesters were not the ultimate nightmare. They were running from one. Kate found Sam in the medical bay, still sitting with Danny. She pulled him aside and told him everything she had learned. She expected fear. She expected despair. What she got instead surprised her. Sam listened carefully to every word. Then he stood a little, and his eyes grew hard. "Good," he said. Kate stared at him. "Good. Sam, there is something worse than the harvesters out there. Something that terrified a species powerful enough to destroy civilizations." "Yes," Sam agreed. "And now we know what we are really fighting. We know there is a reason behind this. That means there might be a way to end it. Or we could all die screaming in the void." Sam smiled at her then, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Kate, we are humans. Dying screaming in the void is basically our natural state, but we are still here. And as long as we are here, we fight." In her chambers, Ambassador Kell reviewed the day's events and found herself unable to sleep. The humans had been classified as potential threats. Most of the council wanted them gone. The logical path was clear. But kept thinking about Captain Harper sharing his food. She kept thinking about Lieutenant Monroe making her crew laugh. She kept thinking about 37 battered survivors who had crossed unknown space in a dying ship, not to beg for help, but to find a way to help themselves. These humans were insane. They were impossible. They were terrifying. And for the first time in centuries, Kell believed the galaxy might actually have a chance. The alarms started screaming at dawn. 3 more ships had appeared at the edge of sensor range, moving in the same impossible patterns as the horizon. But these ships were different. These ships were armed. N mobilized his security forces immediately. Whatever was coming, he would be ready. The station's defense grid locked onto the approaching vessels and prepared to fire. Then the lead ship transmitted an identification code. It was human. Sam Harper pushed past his guards and ran to the communications center. His face went pale when he saw the ship's name on the screen. It was the Defiance, flagship of Admiral Grace, his mother's ship. "Stand down," Sam ordered. "Those are our people. They are not hostile." "They are armed," N growled. "Heavily armed." "Of course they are. They have been fighting a war." Sam turned to face the Massive directly. "Let me speak to them, please. I can explain everything." The council agreed, though only barely. The human ships were allowed to dock under heavy guard. When the airlocks opened, a woman stepped out who looked nothing like the refugees from the horizon. Admiral Grace was small by human standards, barely reaching N's chest. Her hair was gray at the temples, and her face carried the lines of someone who had spent decades making hard decisions. But her eyes were sharp, her uniform was clean, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight she cared about winning. "Sam," she said, pulling her son into a tight embrace, "thank God you made it." "Mom," Sam held her for a long moment before stepping back, "how did you find us?" "Your distress beacon. We have been tracking it for weeks." Grace looked around at the alien faces, watching them with a mixture of fear and fascination. "So this is the famous Galactic Council, smaller than I expected." Speaker appeared on a floating platform above them. "Admiral, you bring warships to Sovereign Council space. Explain yourself." Grace met the ancient's gaze without flinching. "I bring 3 ships. You have thousands. If I wanted a fight, I would need a lot more firepower." She paused. "I am here because my people are dying and I was hopping to find allies. But I am starting to wonder if that was a mistake." "You come seeking alliance," War Leader laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Against the Void Harvesters. No alliance can defeat them. They are invincible." Grace smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Really?" she said. "Then why have we destroyed 17 of their ships?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the translators seemed to stop working for a moment. His laughter died in his throat. "Impossible," he managed. "I have the combat recordings if you would like to see them." Grace pulled a small device from her pocket and activated it. Holographic images filled the air above them, showing human ships engaging the nightmare vessels. The footage was chaotic, violent, and undeniably real. In the recordings, human ships swarmed around harvester vessels like angry insects. They took devastating hits and kept fighting. They rammed enemy ships when their weapons failed. They sacrificed themselves to protect their comrades. And one by one, harvester ships began to die. "How?" whispered. "The harvesters have never been defeated, not once in 12,000 years." Grace's expression darkened. "We did not have a choice. When they came for, we did not know what they were. We just knew something was killing our people, so we fought back with everything we had." She paused. "We lost 9 colonies, 3 million people, but we made them bleed for every single one." The council members looked at each other in confusion and growing wonder. These humans had done what countless civilizations had failed to do. They had hurt the unkillable enemy. Before anyone could respond, every light in the station flickered. Every screen went dark. Every translator fell silent. Then a voice spoke, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. We see you, little ones. The voice was wrong. It was not sound but something deeper, something that vibrated in the bones and crawled across the skin. It was the voice of the void itself. The harvest continues. You will be consumed. All will be consumed. This is the only truth. Panic erupted in the assembly. Species that had not experienced fear in generations screamed and fled for the exits. Even the greatest warrior of his age took an involuntary step backward. But the humans did not move. Sam Harper walked to the center of the chamber, directly below the main communication array where the voice seemed strongest. He looked up at the ceiling as if staring directly into the eyes of whatever spoke. "No," he said. The voice paused. In all its countless, it had never heard that word spoken with such conviction. "You cannot resist. You are small. You are weak. You are nothing." "Maybe," Sam agreed, "but we are also stubborn. We are also angry, and we do not know how to quit." He took a breath and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "My name is Sam Harper. I speak for humanity, and I am telling you directly, we reject your harvest. If you want Earth, if you want any human world, you will have to take it from us. From every human who ever lived, who lives now, and who will ever live in the future. You challenge us." The voice sounded almost curious. "No species has ever challenged us." "Then I guess there is a first time for everything." For a long moment nothing happened. The voice was silent. The lights remained dark. Then slowly the word came. "Accepted." The voice faded. The lights returned. The translators hummed back to life, and every being in the chamber turned to stare at the humans standing in the center of the room. "You just declared war on the Void Harvesters," said slowly. "You just challenged the greatest horror in galactic history to a fight." Grace stepped up beside her son and put a hand on his shoulder. Her smile had returned, fiercer than before. "That is right," she said. "And now you have a choice. You can run and hide and wait for them to consume you one by one, or you can stand with us and make them regret ever entering this galaxy." Speaker looked at the humans for a long moment. Then, for the first time in centuries, he laughed. "You are insane," he said. "Probably," Sam admitted. "But we are also your best chance, maybe your only chance. What do you say?" Around the chamber, species that had been enemies for generations looked at each other. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves nodding in unison, because the humans were right. Running had never worked. Hiding had never worked. Nothing had ever worked. Maybe it was time to try something new. Maybe it was time to fight. One by one, the representatives of the Galactic Council began to stand. The vote was not unanimous. It never could have been, not with so many species and so many centuries of distrust. But when the final count came in, 312 civilizations had pledged their support to the Human Alliance. 78 abstained. Only 10 voted against. It was enough. Ships began arriving within days. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and vessels that easy classification. The largest fleet in galactic history assembled around the Council Station. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds, all preparing to face the nightmare together. Chief Engineer Tony Vance had never been happier. The human mechanic was surrounded by alien technology that should have been incomprehensible, and he was learning it faster than anyone thought possible. "The principles are the same," he explained to a group of confused alien engineers. "Power generation, propulsion, weapons systems. You use different materials and different methods, but the underlying physics does not change." He grinned. "Your shields are better than ours. Our weapons are more destructive than yours. What happens if we combine them?" What happened was a new class of hybrid warship that could take a beating that would destroy a council vessel and hit back with firepower that made alien admirals uncomfortable. Tony called them. The name stuck. In the research wing, Dr. Lily Grant was making discoveries of her own. They had requested every scrap of harvester material the council had collected over the. Most of it was useless, degraded beyond analysis, but a few samples remained viable. "They are connected," Lily announced at a strategy meeting. "Every harvester is part of a single consciousness. They share thoughts, memories, decisions. When one sees something, they all see it. When one learns something, they all learn it." War leader frowned. "How is this a weakness? It sounds like a strength." "It is both." Lily pulled up a holographic display showing the harvester neural network. "They have never experienced individuality. They cannot comprehend the concept of personal sacrifice. Every tactical decision they make assumes their enemies will prioritize survival." Admiral Grace leaned forward. "Because that is what they would do." "Exactly. If we threaten the whole, they expect the parts to retreat. They cannot predict someone who would die to protect others. It breaks their calculations." Sam Harper stood at the back of the room, listening carefully. Beside him, Kate Monroe was making notes on a tablet, her copper hair falling across her face as she worked. "There is more," Lily continued. "I have been developing a biological agent. It will not kill them, but it should be able to disrupt their network, force them to experience individual consciousness for the first time." "And what happens then?" Kate asked. Lily hesitated. "I do not know. They might shut down completely. They might panic, or they might become even more dangerous." She looked around the room. "It is a gamble." "Everything is a gamble," Grace said. "The question is whether the odds are worth the risk." Later that night, Sam found Kate on an observation deck, staring out at the assembled fleet. Thousands of lights hung in the darkness, each one representing a ship full of beings who had chosen to stand against the impossible. "Are you okay?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Kate did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I am afraid, Sam. I have been afraid since, and I keep waiting for it to stop, but it never does." She turned to look at him. "How do you do it? How do you stand up there and challenge gods when your hands should be shaking?" Sam was quiet for a moment. "My hands are shaking," he admitted. "They have been shaking for months. I just got good at hiding it." "Then how do you keep going?" "Because the alternative is giving up, and giving up means everyone I care about dies." He reached over and took her hand. "Courage is not about not being afraid, Kate. It is about being terrified and choosing to act anyway. It is about deciding that some things matter more than your fear." Kate looked down at their joined hands. "What things?" "The people beside you, the ones who came before, the ones who will come after." Sam squeezed her fingers gently. You matter more than my fear." Kate did not respond with words. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, and they sat together watching the fleet prepare for war. 3 days later, the scouts reported contact. The Harvester fleet had been detected approaching the threshold, a narrow corridor of stable space that provided the only safe path to the core worlds. It was the perfect place for a defensive stand. It was also the place where the galaxy would live or die. The combined fleet moved into position. Thousands of ships formed battle lines across the threshold, their weapons charged, their crews ready. Aboard every vessel, beings of every species made peace with their gods, said goodbye to their loved ones, and prepared to fight. Admiral Grace addressed the fleet from the bridge of the Defiance. Her face appeared on every screen in every ship. "I am not going to lie to you," she said. "The enemy we face has destroyed countless civilizations. They are older than our recorded history. They are more powerful than anything we have ever encountered." She paused. "But they have never faced us, all of us together." She looked directly into the camera, and somehow it felt like she was looking at each individual person in the fleet. "Today we do not fight for victory. We fight for the right to exist. We fight for everyone who came before us and everyone who will come after. Win or lose, live or die, the galaxy will remember that when darkness came, we stood." Across the fleet, weapons came online, shields activated, engines powered up. Then the darkness arrived. The Harvester fleet emerged from subspace like a wave of shadow. There were hundreds of them, each one larger than the biggest Council battleship. They moved in perfect synchronization, their black hulls absorbing light, their weapons glowing with cold fire. Sam Harper stood on the bridge of the horizon, which had been repaired enough to fight. Kate was beside him. His mother's ship was ahead of them. Behind them, thousands of Allied vessels waited for the signal. All ships, Grace's voice came over the fleet channel. Advance. The battle for the galaxy had begun. The first wave of attacks killed thousands. Harvester weapons tore through shields that should have held, ripped apart armor that should have protected, silenced ships that should have survived. The Allied fleet reeled backward, their formations breaking under the assault. Aboard the Council flagship, War Leader watched his tactical displays fill with death. Ship after ship winked out of existence. Entire battle groups vanished in seconds. The Harvesters advanced through the carnage without slowing, without hesitating, without mercy. "This is hopeless," muttered one of his officers. "We cannot stop them." Then the human ships moved. The Defiance broke formation first, accelerating directly toward the Harvester line. Behind it, every human vessel in the fleet followed. They did not hold back. They did not protect themselves. They charged straight into the heart of the enemy. "What are they doing?" demanded. "They will be destroyed." On the communication channel, Admiral Grace's voice was calm. "All human ships, initiate Protocol Omega. It has been an honor serving with you." The human ships were not just attacking. They were delivering a payload. Tony Vance's engineering teams had spent the last 3 days converting every human vessel into a delivery system for Lily Grant's biological weapon. The ships themselves had become weapons. Harvester beams cut through the human formation. Ships exploded. Crews died. But the humans kept coming, kept advancing, kept fighting through damage that would have stopped any other fleet. Sam Harper watched from the horizon as his mother's ship reached the center of the Harvester formation. The Defiance was burning, its hull breached in a dozen places, its weapons offline. But it was still moving. "Mom," Sam whispered into the communication channel. "Mom, pull back. You have done enough." Grace's face appeared on his screen. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and smoke filled the bridge behind her, but she was smiling. "No such thing as enough, Sam, not when your people need you." She reached toward the camera, almost like she was trying to touch his face. "I am so proud of you. I have always been proud of you. Now finish this." "Mom, please. Take care of Kate, take care of everyone, and remember what I taught you." Her smile widened. "Humans do not quit." The communication cut out. On Sam's tactical display, the Defiance accelerated one final time, heading directly for the largest Harvester vessel, the command ship. The collision was visible across the entire battlefield. The Defiance struck the Harvester command ship at full speed, penetrating deep into its hull before the biological weapon detonated. A wave of energy rippled outward, passing through the Harvester fleet like a shockwave. And then something changed. The Harvesters stopped, not retreated, not regrouped, stopped. Their perfect synchronization broke apart. Ships that had moved as one began drifting separately. Weapons that had fired in coordinated waves fell silent. For the first time in millions of years, the Void Harvesters were alone. Dr. Lily Grant's voice came over the fleet channel. "It is working. The neural network is collapsing. They are experiencing individual consciousness. They are feeling emotions for the first time." "What emotions?" asked. The answer came from the Harvesters themselves. A sound began emanating from their ships, broadcast on every frequency. It was not words. It was not language. It was screaming. The Void Harvesters, ancient and terrible and invincible, were screaming in terror. They had spent millions of years feeding on civilizations. They had consumed countless species without ever understanding what they were destroying. Now, suddenly, they understood. They felt the weight of their crimes. They felt the horror of what they had become. And they felt fear, true, individual, personal fear. One by one, the harvester ships began to turn away. They fled in all directions, no longer coordinated, no longer unified, just thousands of terrified individuals running from something they could not escape, their own consciousness. The Allied fleet watched in stunned silence as the greatest nightmare in galactic history retreated, not defeated in battle, but broken in spirit, destroyed from within by the simple experience of being alone. Sam Harper stood on the bridge of the horizon, tears streaming down his face. His mother was gone. The cost of victory had been paid in blood, but they had won. Kate Monroe put her arm around him and held him while he cried. The celebration lasted for weeks. Species that had been enemies for centuries embraced as friends. Monuments were planned. Songs were written. The Battle of the Threshold would be remembered for as long as civilization endured. But for Sam, the war was not over until he completed one final duty. He stood before the Galactic Council, the same chamber where he had first arrived as a desperate refugee. Now he wore a clean uniform and carried himself like the leader he had become. "The harvesters will return," he told them. "Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for centuries, but they will heal, they will reconnect, and they will remember what we did to them." "Then we are doomed after all," said one of the representatives. "No," Sam shook his head, "because when they return we will be ready, not just humanity, all of us together." He looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species watching him. "My mother died to give us this chance. I will not waste it." Speaker rose from his ancient seat. He crossed the chamber slowly, his pale blue skin catching the light. When he reached Sam, he extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. "Sam Harper," he said, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I officially welcome humanity into our community. Not as newcomers, not as refugees, but as protectors, as family." Sam took his hand and shook it firmly. "We are honored," he said, "and we will not let you down." 6 months later, human intelligence intercepted a message broadcast from the edge of the galaxy. It was Harvester in origin, sent outward to whatever lay in the darkness beyond. The message was short, it was simple, and it changed everything. "Warning to all who dwell beyond. Avoid the third spiral arm. Avoid the yellow stars. Avoid the small blue world and its children. The humans live there, and the humans are worse than we ever were." Kate Monroe showed the message to Sam that night, as they stood together on the observation deck of their new ship, looking out at the stars they had saved. "Worse than they ever were," Kate read aloud. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Sam smiled. It was the first real smile he had managed since his mother died. "It is the highest compliment," he said. "The darkness itself is afraid of us now. That means we are doing something right." Kate leaned into him, and together they watched the stars turn slowly in the endless night. Somewhere out there, the harvesters were healing. Somewhere out there, older horrors lurked in the spaces between galaxies. Somewhere out there, new threats were being born. But humanity was ready, and the galaxy was no longer alone. The nightmare had met something worse than itself. It had met humans.